Hi guys and welcome back. This is my October wrap up, and in October I actually read 4 full books, but one of them wasn't on my TBR list. I'm very bold, I know. I swapped one of my books, but I'll explain in a minute. So the first book that I read during October was Rachel Hawkins' Rebel Belle. Now this is about Harper Price. Harper Price is a perfectionist. She's an all-time American girl and she lives in the South. And what I really liked about this book was that it is what it is. It's a YA, sort of supernatural, come Buffy the Vampire Slayer type of book. It's very much about Harper Price, who's at her homecoming dance when the caretaker bursts in and passes on special powers to Harper. So you leave your sort of skepticism at the door. This is a sort of supernatural superpower. She's a hero now, but she discovers that she has to protect and look after David Stark, who is her arch enemy during kindergarten. And over the course of the book we learn more about Harper and her parents and the loss of her sister, and we discover that David Stark has special powers of his own. And it's very much a light read. It's very much a contemporary YA book, and it was a guilty pleasure for me this month and I really enjoyed it. The chapters were short. I picked it up at the end of the day and read it and had a wee laugh. I don't know, it was just heartwarming in a funny kind of way. The second book in my TBR was Louis de Bernier, The Dust That Falls from Dreams. I really wanted to enjoy this book, and I found at times it difficult to finish. It's a little bit too long in my opinion. I have never read Louis de Bernier. I know he's a very popular author. He wrote Captain Morelli's Mandolin, which was made into a film, and it's set around World War I. So we meet the McCosh family, the mother, father, and they have 4 daughters, and it sort of centres around the daughters, but mainly Rose E. McCosh, and she falls in love and she's engaged at the very beginning of the book, and her fiance goes off to war and he is killed in the war. And it centres around the 4 girls and their love lives and their family and the interactions of 2 other families. And it's very much about class and the changing, I suppose, the changing things that happened for women during World War I, such as volunteering as nurses and so on. And what annoyed me really was it was a really well written book, and he's obviously a talented writer really, but I just felt manipulated at times by the author. I felt like he wanted to pull on the heartstrings, so he brought in the Spanish influenza, and the flu was a terrifying thing for anybody in those days, and especially just after the war when people were just recovering and were worn out and maybe not in the best of health. And it was like he threw in things like that in order to manipulate the emotions of the reader, and I found that frustrating. He did it in a number of occasions that I felt weren't really realistic and were just put in to drive the plot along the way he wanted it to. Also, Rosie, the main character, I found it hard to really like her because he kept pushing a sort of a religious kind of fanaticism in her, and it just kind of, I don't know, it just annoyed me at times. It sort of frustrated me. But I would say that if you're a Louis de Bernier fan, you would probably still really enjoy this. And I did give it 4 out of 5 because it is well written. Third book I had on my TBR, again this month, I didn't get around to it. It's Tom Holt's In Your Dreams. It's the second in the Paul Carpenter series. It's sort of a supernatural book as well. And it's about Paul Carpenter, who joins this accountancy firm, or kind of as a clerk, and there are wizards and there are supernatural powers and there are goblins and all sorts in it, and I'm sure it's really well written. It's, as you can see, quite a big book. I'm hoping to get to it in November, but to be honest with you, I think I've picked up too many books that are sort of supernatural or fantasy. The reason I didn't get to read it was I downloaded on my Kindle the second book in the Ransom Briggs series, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children is book 1, which I have wrapped up last month, Hollow City, and I downloaded it to my Kindle because, to be honest with you, I wanted to get straight into it. I was really anxious to read it, and it's a second book in a trilogy. The third book is Library of Souls. This is a supernatural YA book. It deals with Jacob, who in the first book we meet, and it's about his grandfather, and Jacob believes that his grandfather was sort of, how would I put it, he was in World War II, he was a Jew, he was a refugee, and he went to Wales in the first book to Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. But what we find out is that peculiar are a type of person who is born normal, so a human like you and I, and develop supernatural powers. So one of the characters is invisible, another boy in the book is able to predict the future through his dreams, and it's a very good book. I really enjoyed it. Hollow City is the second one and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Now the fourth book was The Year of the Runaways by Sanjeev Sahata, and it was shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize 2015. It didn't win it, but it was a very good book and I would recommend it. I would give it 4 out of 5 stars, and it's about 3 men who leave India in the hope of a better life and they travel to England. And their stories are interweaved over the course of the novel. I find it very thought-provoking and quite heartbreaking at times, the whole idea of a caste system, and that one of the characters in particular comes from a lower caste, and we see the, I suppose, prejudice that he must overcome or sort of live with, basically, within his own culture and his own community. And I really found that heartbreaking in a lot of ways, and the author really makes you feel for each of the characters in different ways, and it was a very interesting book, and I really enjoyed it, and I don't want to give away too much of the plot if you want to read it. It's not overly heavy, I don't think, for a Man Booker, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 because 1 or 2 things in the book I find a little bit frustrating. Now there's a character called Narinda, and she comes from a very religious family, and she's interwoven into the lives of these men. And one of the reasons I find it frustrating is that I don't believe that she would have done some of the stuff that she does in the plot. I find that a little bit hard to kind of amalgamate into whether or not I believed it as being realistic. And I think that's where the plot line sort of falls for me a bit. But I would definitely give it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I think it's worth a look. That was my October wrap up, and thank you so much for listening to me talk about books.